Welcome to another edition of the American Scouser TV Fantasy Premier League show. As always, am sitting here in dreary Western Massachusetts. Mateusz, how are we doing outside of Chicago?
It's very comfortable outside today. It was a high 60s, slight breeze, lots of sun. It's probably the best kind of weather in my opinion. So, feeling good out here.
So you got about a week and a half, and then it's going to be freezing, it's going to be windy, and you're going to whine till the rest of the spring, right?
Oh yeah, it's gonna be 42 degrees by Friday. So yeah, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be good
Yeah,
old Illinois.
it's going to be Chicago weather.
Yeah.
Well, so we're going to jump in as we always do with a quick reminder of our Fantasy Premier League, the American Scouser Cup. It is still open as of now. We will be shutting it down at some point soon. But for now, you can still get in. Just type in the code, enter in the manual, go to your normal subscriptions for leagues, and find us there. We would love to have you jump in, and then we'll know you'll be in as the years move forward. Um, Obviously, we haven't hit the point yet as we're filming this and recording to you on Monday night. Um, the match week has just ended, haven't even had the full provisionals yet. So some of our screens and standings won't be completely updated, but they're within, a few points of the overall standings. So as we look here, Mateusz, at our top 10, with our number one person being the FPL unknown, George, 626 points. It's a pretty solid score, top 50,000 in the world. Um, if you're George right now, how are you feeling, Mateusz?
Nervous because the blank game week's coming up, and I'm sure he's got Arsenal and City assets. So it's going to be really interesting to see where all these top guys, which direction they go in.
Yeah, it's a great point. We're going to talk a little bit about that when we talk about our game week 11 moves, our ins and outs like we do every week, and think about what we should have done and what we're going to do. We are going to look at 11 our match week 11 moves and how it's going to affect knowing what we know about match week 12, and the fact that most of us that feel good about our sides right now have anywhere from 4 to 6 assets between City and Arsenal scattered. Most of us with the upper parts of 5 or 6 total assets between the two sides themselves. um it's a really good top 10 here. I will say it pains me that maybe a transfer or a substitution move one way or the other, and my name would be on that screen because I currently sit in 11th place at 607 points. But we don't stack the deck here at American Scouser. We show you the top 10 every week, even though I'm in 11th. Not going to show you 11 until next week, like, if I'm still in 11th, and then I will probably show you 11th. But the only thing worse than finishing one outside of the top 10 would probably be to have a head-to-head matchup with the person you co-host a podcast with and lose. And to be honest, this is one where I'm actually excited that we took it a little early because I'm actually going to lose this 75-68. But this makes it look a little better.
It does.
So take your pound of flesh and then remind yourself you're 1.5 million places behind me in the overall standings.
Hey man, it's all about the steady grind back up. The reason why I started so poorly is so I could have green arrows every single week afterwards, and that's how it feels right now. So I'm climbing up there. I'll etch away if I get 6 more points than you for the rest of the game weeks. That's what, 28 game weeks. So that's 148, 150 points. I'm gonna catch you.
Do we believe that's going to happen?
Oh, absolutely not. But it's possible.
Well played. No, it was a good match. Actually, we had too many of the same players. I tried to make my move. Hindsight being 2020, I guess I could have just left, not made the moves, left Mitrovic in, made a different move, pulled in Andreas like you did off the bench.
Mm.
But it was what it is. It was a good matchup, actually. It was fun to do it. We'll talk a little bit further there. But before we get into what we both did, anything you learned from this match week, just looking at the scores, the systems, what you saw, how the template did?
Oh, sorry. I thought there was something else that you were going for there. Um, what I learned is that I don't know anything still. It's one of those things where it's been such a weird year. And it's so funny. I'm just going back to I remember a conversation we had early in the year before everything started. Like, you know what? Mendy at 5 million, that could be a steal at goalkeeper, right? The steal is that he took 5 million away from you. That's what the steal was. Because he has been playing like poorly, and then Kepa comes in, holds a clean sheet, and you're sitting here like, what is even going on anymore? So, if anything, it's just kind of led to more chaos and more reasons why this can be so much fun because it's so unpredictable. Besides Holland.
Yeah, if I was just gonna say, if I've learned anything, it's you can do well just putting the armband on Holland, making sure you have a couple other big assets each week that are gonna score, and then you're overall you'll just be above the average as long as you're captaining Holland. It's almost getting to like the ridiculous levels, to the point where if you don't captain him and he scores, you're absolutely losing ground.
Mm.
Because the expected ownership is over 100%, which is just insane when you start to think about the fact that he's owned now by 70% of the game as the most expensive player. At the end of the year, we'll talk about players and pricing and what we expect. I'm not going to lie. If things don't change, I expect him to come into next year at like 15 million. And it'll just be the most ridiculously asinine thing ever. But it's the same reason, to your point earlier. Mendy was 5 and Allison was 5.5. They tried to tempt us into buying into big keepers because they thought if you had to buy a big keeper, it would be harder to have Mo and have Holland, or have Mo and Kane. And they were just trying to make it so that you couldn't just pick a template of players. They didn't realize that all you had to do was avoid the template, which was which three of Liverpool's players do you want? Because I think right now, if you didn't have a Liverpool player since Jump and you spent your money wisely, you'd probably be in the top like 1,000 to 2,000 of this game,
Absolutely.
because so much money has been invested. I mean, some teams 30, 35% at times into Liverpool, just waiting for things to break. Um, Obviously, another odd performance against Arsenal. Really interesting matchup, in my opinion. Lots of great talking points from a fantasy perspective, especially with Saka scoring, Martinelli scoring. Saka with the brace, but the penalty is what it is. Gabriel Jesus gets the assist on the shitty penalty. Oops, I said it out loud. Show my colors. But then you have Diaz, you have Nunez, you have Bobby Firmino's renaissance. Like, how do you shake out Liverpool versus Arsenal? And from a fantasy perspective, where do these top sides go from here for you?
Yeah, especially from Arsenal's perspective, starting there, I've been I know Osaka was in that 8 million midfield bracket that's kind of been the hot topic of the year is kind of knowing which one to have in. And I know a lot of people were down on Saka, myself included, because it seemed like a lot of Arsenal's play was coming from the left, especially in the beginning of the year. And so to see him be able to convert both the chances that he got yesterday, I feel like his value is going to rise a little bit. But the problem is, if you do pick him up for Leeds, you're going to have that blank game week. So right now, it's a very you're in a very vulnerable position if you're trying to pick up assets that you have. It's one of those things where if you didn't have the assets already, don't look to bring them in, even though it's Leeds, because you're still going to have to work with that blank game week. You're going to miss out on a couple pieces on in your team because you're going to have too many players that you have to rotate in. and you're going to take a bunch of at least a 4 8 point hit, depending on how many players you need that could actually play. And from Liverpool's perspective, I feel like fantasy wise, maybe it kind of opens the door for more interesting Liverpool play. Before it was always just Mo and Trent, right? And now we're in this position, especially with Diaz being out 6 to 8 weeks, which in Liverpool terms means he might be out for the year. Never know. It's one of those things where we kind of you can use that extra 4 5 6 million from Trent and Mo combined, downgrading to then move up to a Nunez and a Firmino because they're going to be getting minutes while Diaz is gone. Because there really isn't going to be much depth up there because you're going to have Jota on the left and then you'll have either Nunez or Bobby starting. So if you want to invest that 8 to 9 million on a forward and you don't have, let's say, Jesus for the blank game week, then maybe having one of those guys for West Ham is a way to go.
Well, let's take a look at your side as we speak. The side that beat me last week, you bastard. So it was the same as I would expect. Cancelo, Holland, Madison, Martinelli, Perisic. We shared those right up the gut.
Hmm.
I had Mitrovic too. I ended up making the move. We'll talk about that as always. Mitrovic comes back to screw me whether he gets subbed off in 15 minutes with a yellow card or I sub him off and then lose subsequently because of it. Remind me again, did you make a move last week with this side or did you roll a free transfer in?
No, so I dropped Isak for Solanke because I felt like I wanted someone up top with Holland, and based on fixtures and just kind of just pure, I'll just call it luck. I don't know. I just there was some talk about Solanke, and I was like, you know what? Maybe it's worth the punt on him this week just to make up for the lack of forward depth because I knew Mitrovic was most likely not going to play. So I set it up in a way where I knew I could get at least points from Andres Pereira if that were to happen. Which if I were behind you a couple points, that'd be great. It would matter. Now it doesn't really matter as much. It matters in the overall standings. So I took the punt on Solanke, knowing that Bournemouth also has Fulham and Southampton the next 2 weeks. So I feel like having that option up there, especially for when Holland doesn't have a game week, can kind of prove to be a little beneficial to me. So that's the one move I made, which happened to be the best move I could have made with our head to head.
Yeah, it worked out well. I mean, you picked up a trash player. He picked up a trash assist off a missed kick off a crossbar, and they gave him an assist. When the assist came up 15 minutes later, I was like, son of a yes, something Polish, and I can't say it on the air. I've swore a lot, and I can't say that word on the air. But no, it was something else. The big Dom showing up to kick me in the ass again. Well played. So as we talk, before we talk about what you plan to do with your team this week, let's take a little bit of a look at the outgoings. No surprise here. Top three outgoing players. Once again, I think this is 3 or 4 weeks in a row that the top two, if not three players, have been Liverpool players. Salah and Alexander Arnold have definitely been on this um, screen. So if you're still holding on to those players, I fear for the overall value of your squad because I have to see price decreases coming quickly for both.
Yeah.
So Diaz, obviously, with the news that he'll be out until after the World Cup, no surprise there to see people jettisoning off of him. I'll be one of them. We'll talk about that a little later here in the episode. Alexander Arnold, again, injury concerns, most likely going to be out for the City match. Some reports calling for 2 to 3 weeks on the sidelines would be just so Liverpool of him to have that happen on a play where he gets done by a defender. Um, and of course, Salah, the man, the legend, the myth, 500,000 a week. Exactly no reason to start scoring. So what do you have to say about that? the screen, the fact that Liverpool has gone from basically fantasy elite to meh.
If anything, maybe we offer a thank you to all the people in the world who still believe that they'd get it together up until this point, because the fact that there are so many people that are still selling them means that there were a lot of people that were still on them and had hopes that they would return. So we thank you for that sacrifice that you made for the rest of us. But it's just it seems like just a huge fall from grace, unfortunately, right now, and it hurts because I know we talked about how Mo was the best fantasy player of the last 4 or 5 years, and now it's just difficult to see him not gonna be he's not gonna be owned by anyone at some point. I mean, I feel like if this trend continues, you can't justify having a 12 to 13 million dollar midfielder that scores once and assists once every 8 games, right? So I can only see it going down from here, which is a little upsetting. Maybe post World Cup we'll kind of see a difference, but in the time being, I don't know how much longer these guys can stay on the list because it depends on how many people still own them. So I guess we'll have to see if there are still some people who are holding them through City, and then seeing what happens there. I mean, at least Salah, because I know Trent and Diaz won't be playing, so it kind of comes down to Mo.
I wanted to make the joke that by week 30, no matter how bad it gets, Mo Salah will be like a differential owned by less than 3%. Pick up Mo Salah. But you know what the funny part is? So many of the 10.5 million people just start week one and then don't come back. They're all the people who will have like the $11.5 million Salah at the end of the year. Because they're the only ones that are still going to have him in the side. The ones who
Yeah.
start at week one and haven't come back since. Because anyone who has watched this Premier League season knows that it's just not happening for Mo. His underlying statistics are still there as far as goal creation, but his expected goal involvement just isn't there. His average shots aren't there, and his touches inside the box, as any Liverpool supporter can tell you, aren't there because he spends most of his time hanging out with the officials on the sidelines waiting for the flags to go up because the assistant referee is the only person on the pitch wider than Mo Salah at the moment. But I digress. When we look at the outgoing names, Mitrovic, obviously the injuries. Do you think Bernardo is just a subject of everybody else is putting up fantasy points but Bernardo?
Yeah, and it's kind of you're gonna invest in the mids at City. You're gonna go with KDB, with Foden, with Mares. Right now, it's kind of with even with Gundogan. So I feel like that's where we're at. He's just the victim of the Pep roulette and the FPL roulette of Pep's midfield right now. Because if you have a City team that's scoring in 4, 5, 6 goals a game, and he's only part of one of those every couple games, then you're not going to want to invest your money there. You're going to want to invest your money elsewhere where the guys are being involved in 2 to 3 of the goals every game, like
So
Foden.
as we transitions from the outgoing to the incoming, once again, a little bit dominated by city names, which I have to admit is a little surprising to me when a team has a blank game week a week later. That the incoming transfers are so heavy to be Foden and Cancelo at the top. I completely understand Trippier. Trossard didn't exactly light it up against Spurs, but you could see that there were still some really bright signs of how Brighton was playing against Spurs, especially playing at home under the new manager. And I think he's going to unleash and they're going to play on the front foot, which is only going to help arguably their best player in Trossard. And then anyone who watched the Liverpool match yesterday, in my opinion, should have seen that Martinelli was the best player on the pitch on either side of the ball, the most lively, the most energetic, the one who looked like he was going to do the most damage throughout the match. Um, so I can understand at his price point, even with his blank game week 12. Little surprised to see 3 players here not playing in 2 weeks at the top of our transfer in list for this week.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I think the weirdest one is Martinelli because I feel like who doesn't own him at this point at his price point, especially since the beginning of the year. everyone's been talking about Martinelli. It hasn't changed week to week. It's always been Martinelli. And so I guess it's a little weird to see that so many people haven't been on him. But yeah, I don't know if this is just one of those where maybe somehow they don't the rest of their players they have enough rotation in mind where for the blank game week they have a move or two, a move this week and a move next week that's going to kind of put them in a position they want to be, which is the only way that I can kind of justify seeing that. Because yeah, I don't know. I would not want to take a risk on bringing in any City or Arsenal player this week, even if they light the world on fire. It's just for me having the stress of the blank game week for both just creates more of a headache than having one great week.
So we come back to your side. You told us that you made the move this week and brought in Solanke. So you have one free transfer.
Mm-hmm.
What, do you know what your moves are at this point? Have you thought about what this week looks like? Does it have any impact on what is going to happen next week?
I I like how because last week I said I'm probably going to roll the transfer and I lied to everyone because I didn't roll the transfer. I'm going to say it this time. I think I'm going to roll the transfer because then I feel like taking having both moves next week after this upcoming game week will kind of give me the most information I want heading into the blank game week for Arsenal and City. And so I'm thinking I'm going to have to take out two of those guys and rotate them at least. So in my head, I'm probably doing a De Bruyne and Cancelo swap potentially. I know I'm looking at Trossard myself because Brighton has Nottingham Forest in that blank game week, so I feel like that's a really good fixture for Brighton. And then I'm also potentially maybe looking at a Chelsea asset as well, considering they have Brentford in that blank game week, and they played the decent game against Wolves. So it's just the problem with Chelsea, I guess, right now is which asset do you back because it's kind of there's not really one sole focus in that offense. So I think
Not Reece James.
not Reece James. No, not Reece
Not
James.
not in the week where you just need him to show up and get a clean sheet. When the rest of the side gets a clean sheet and you lose. Not that guy.
I mean, he held a clean sheet for like 30 minutes, right?
I, I
He should
appreciate
get
I
half a point.
appreciate that. Appreciate that.
um,
Bastard.
so yeah, it's just I feel like because I don't Fafana's going to be out for a while. Nico, he's lucky he got subbed on because Nico's usually at least a 0 or a -1. And so Fulham having Villa away in the blank game week, I could find myself starting Pereira and be comfortable with that. So I think it'll just come down to swapping two guys, and I think KDB and Cancelo are going to be the two that I'm going to rotate for the game week.
So here's my side. As anyone who's listened to this podcast slash program would tell you, I hate me some Mitrovic, and he's basically ruined years of my fantasies. Made me almost quit the game. Picked him up last week for the first time all year after swearing I'd never put him on my team again. He proceeded to play 25 minutes, get a yellow card, and get subbed off, and then miss the next match week. So I couldn't let him sit on my bench with a 0. So I dropped him for Wilson. And I got to tell you, I feel really good about the move. The way Newcastle's playing, Wilson's on penalties. He's always lively if he's fit. And I understand if he's not fit, he's an easy move to another striker. At his price point, he can become Tony. He can become, you know, a 6.5 striker. Hell, he can even become your crappy Solanke if I need him to be. But I knew what I was doing here. I was staying with my moves. I was trying to kind of balance my defenders while also playing with my top line strikers. I feel good about my bench right now. And I walk into this match week really frustrated with the Louis Diaz red, all over the place because I know I have to move him now. That wasn't my plan. I was going to stick him out as my Liverpool asset, thick and through, because it feels like he gets an attacking return in every match that he plays in. So I think at this point I'm stuck. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm between two different angles here. I'm definitely going to move Diaz, and I'm going to take a -4 this week, and I'm going to move Cancelo out. Who I do it to is the question. Because I could go Sterling, right? And I
Yeah.
could come in with like a $6 million defender. But they're not that much stronger than the defenders I already have. And Saliba on the bench, which I think is probably better than all the defenders, as good as any defender I have in there. So my thought is maybe I go big boy pants and I go all the way up to Sun and I come in with another fodder like a Gui or a Mings or a 4-3-4-4 defender, almost out of the fact that I one that I know will be playing, but honestly, I know I'm always going to start three of Saliba, Trippier, James, Perisic, and if one of them doesn't play, then I have a bench player that is still getting minutes, like a guy, a Gui or a Mings. What are your thoughts on my moves for this week, and what would you do if you were in my spot?
Yeah, I like that. I feel like you already mentioned it that you kind of have your hand forced here. It wasn't something that you were planning on doing, and so I think where your head is at is good. I wonder if yeah, I don't I can I'm not gonna ever question anything you do because historically you're gonna be always above me. So I feel like with what I'm hearing you say, it makes a ton of sense. I don't know if I looking at it right now, if I can think of a better option for you. I know possibly not having that Liverpool asset might be a little frustrating considering with West Ham coming up, and at least having at least someone there. But by that time, you might be able to bring in someone like Nunez potentially if you wanted to, or Bobby or Jota, like depending on if you feel like you really need one of those Liverpool assets. So I think where your head is at is fine because Crystal Palace has Leicester and Wolves, and so Gahey could easily get a clean or two out of those two fixtures because the Palace defense is pretty good. It's just a matter of if they can stay turned on all 90 because I feel like there's moments where they turn off and it's just really bad. But as a unit, they seem to be pretty cohesive.
And you make a good point, and I should have reminded you and any of the listeners here as I'm talking through this. I do have the advantage that I haven't used my wild card yet. So my plan, I'm almost talking through my maneuvers around how I plan to get through 12 with the idea of probably wild carding in 13, where I could by then go to Nunez if Salah looks like he's popped back on, go to Salah. It's part of the reason I'm not afraid to go to a lopsided team by bringing in Son. I really like the idea of having Son and Kane for the Everton fixture. Um, and I won't lie, there's part of me that's even thinking about captaining one of them
Ooh,
instead of Holland.
spicy.
Because I do think there are going to be opportunities for people to make smart captaincy decisions that if they pay off in your favor, and they're not like crazy gambles where you'll pick up the 10 to 20 points you need, which in a normal year you get when the decision between Aguero, Kane, and Salah was a legitimate decision every week around who you captain. And you might own all three, but if you don't pick the right one, you're going to drop considerably in the standings. It's not that way anymore because you just give the captaincy to Holland all day. I, I'll still probably leave it on him out of fear that he'll put 5 up at Anfield. Um,
Please God no.
just, please God, no. Both, yes, please, no. I won't be able to handle that Monday. I'll just quit for life. Um, so I do think now if you were me though, would you go Son and Guy, or would you go Sterling or even Bruno Fernandez, who has some appealing fixtures coming up, and he is an actual differential um, based on percentage of ownership? Would you consider more of that range where I could then come in at whatever defender I wanted? My problem is I'm picking up like Eric Dyer then, and I don't know that picking up a $5 or $5.5 million defender is that much better than a 4.5. if I think they each have one clean sheet and 3 spots on my bench out of the next 6 match weeks.
Right. And have you thought about someone like Bowen possibly? Or I know that they've got Liverpool in 12, but they have Southampton next week. So I don't know if Bowen could be a possible play in that midfield too.
I thought about Bowen on the wild card after the Liverpool match leading into
Mm,
the World Cup. I've also thought about Bowen as a like for Madison at some point, as the Leicester fixtures start to turn. We only have a handful of matches before the World Cup, and I have the wild card. So it's not
yeah.
even, it's almost like maximizing next week in preparation of 12, because I don't want a wild card in 12, because I want to use the wild card to bring city assets back into my side.
Right.
And to be totally honest, as crazy as this sounds, I think I'm gonna bury Holland on my bench, even though I know I could make a free transfer and use that money, because I don't want to lose the 500,000 it takes to buy him back.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it just makes more sense to stick him on the bench. And I think those are things people don't think about as they see their squad value go up. They think they have to sell their assets to make that value. Yes, if you want to profit, but if you ever see that player coming back, you have to pay for the difference.
Right.
So you're better off just stashing an asset like Holland at the end of your bench for 1 week. It'll hurt me in 12. But I think it's the reason I almost feel like I have to get off at least one of, if not two, of Martinelli and even Saliba by then. And that's going to pain me. And I think if it was one of them, it'd probably be Saliba. I may bury all three and just hope and keep the fingers crossed. And maybe between now and then, I just upgrade Bailly if he's not getting 90 minutes to a tried and trusted midfielder that I know will play.
Mm.
Pick up a Højbjerg and hope for a assist or a smashed in goal, a Xhaka. Um,
Shaka's
but
playing up
I
top
know he's
a lot.
adding a lot of points. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, except for he's not playing in 12. Stupid. Um, but that was pretty well played by us. Um, that show prep at its finest, people. But no, I think my biggest concept here is I have to stay with what I've been doing, which is I've had a plan week to week that I've honestly executed now for about 5, 6 match weeks in a row, that I haven't deviated from what my plan was with like late injuries or issues. And it really has helped me. I mean, I've gone from 2-3 million in the world. I was in top 200,000 at one point during this match week. I've fallen back out now. I think I'm 225,000, something like that. I'm very, very happy with where that is. 10 match weeks in. Only 9 matches played by most of the sides. So, I'm gonna attack this the way I always do. Just try to be consistent, make good moves, and hopefully the green arrows will follow. Okay, everyone, that's gonna do it for another edition of the American Scouser TV Fantasy Premier League show. This was your Match Week 11 preview strategy session. Hopefully, you found the information shared tonight helpful. If you liked it, send all your likes and comments to myself. If you didn't, send all of your anger to my co host. That's what you get for winning. From all of us here at American Scouser, thank you for watching. As always, please like, share, comment, and as always, subscribe to the channel so you can get all the great content that we're putting out. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you, everyone, next week.